Hello there. To ensure that Northern Ireland and some EU countries can continue to be supplied with medicines for animals from the United Kingdom, the EU Commission is extending the necessary exception rules. Specifically, Malta, Cyprus, and Ireland are also affected, according to an announcement by EU Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic on Monday. This should initially apply until December 2025. And according to the Commission, the markets in these regions have in the past been supplied with medicines from or via Great Britain. After Brexit, concerns arose that Great Britain's exit from the common internal market and the associated restrictions on trade could lead to supply bottlenecks there. Northern Ireland is affected because it is still part of Britain and part of the United Kingdom. And in order to avoid a hard border between Ireland and Northern Ireland continues to follow the rules of the EU internal market. This led to restrictions on trade between Great Britain and the north of the Emerald Isle. The US government has now appointed the great-nephew of US President John F. Kennedy, who was assassinated in 1963, Joe Kennedy III, as special envoy for Northern Ireland on economic issues. The 42-year-old will work for economic development and investment opportunities in Northern Ireland for the benefit of all communities and the ties between Northern Ireland and the United States. That's what Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, said on Monday. Kennedy is building on the long-standing US commitment to peace, prosperity, and stability in Northern Ireland and the peace dividend of the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement. According to Blinken, other US diplomats should continue to work at the political level to settle the dispute over the so-called Northern Ireland Protocol and to ensure that Northern Ireland gets a functioning government again. Northern Ireland is currently in a political deadlock over the protocol negotiated between London and the European Union. With the agreement, Northern Ireland remains part of the European single market, creating a de facto goods customs border with the island of Great Britain. Northern Ireland's unionists find this unacceptable, fearing for Northern Ireland's affiliation with the United Kingdom. And this dispute poses a threat to the 1998 peace agreement, known as the Good Friday Agreement, which ended the roughly 30-year Northern Ireland conflict that killed several thousand people and is also hampering the formation of a workable government in Northern Ireland, although that DUP is only second helps there too. Joe Kennedy III, grandson of former U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, who was assassinated in 1968, was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives for 8 years, from 2013. In 2020, he lost the Massachusetts Democratic primary for a seat in the U.S. Senate and subsequently resigned from Congress. For the legendary Kennedy family, this was a historic turning point. Since 1947, with the exception of 2 years, a Kennedy has always held an elected political office in the USA. Joe Kennedy III is the fourth generation of the family in politics. But the situation in the former Civil War region of Northern Ireland is explosive. Founded more than 100 years ago as a bastion of Protestant supporters of the union with Great Britain, more Catholics now live in Northern Ireland. They are traditionally in favor of unification with the EU member Ireland. This development makes it likely that there will actually be a referendum in the next few years. And if you ask around in Ireland's capital Dublin, the only question seems to be when the merger will take place, not if. According to the latest poll, 2/3 of Irish people would vote in favor. But the situation is a little different in Northern Ireland. Not only would the vast majority of Protestants vote to remain in the kingdom, so would a good fifth of Catholics. Experts have identified an important factor there, the fear of new unrest. It was only in 2019 that the Republican terror group New IRA carried out attacks again. The New IRA is also a possible perpetrator of the bomb attack on police officers in November of this year. But especially on the loyalist side, things are simmering. The magazine Purple Standard, which is considered the mouthpiece of the terrorist group UVF recently warned that the leadership was no longer able to hold back angry junior staff. And it is about the consequences of Brexit. From the point of view of the Unionists, the agreement between the EU and Great Britain endangers the ties between Belfast and London. Because with this so-called Northern Ireland Protocol, a goods customs border was created in the Irish Sea. On the other hand, they resist with all their might, as they say. And that paralyzes the region. Because of the Brexit dispute, the most important Protestant unionist force, the DUP, is boycotting the formation of the planned unity government with the Republican Catholic Sinn Féin party. A new election will probably not solve the stalemate. And ironically, on the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement in April, which ended the civil war in 1998, there is a risk of escalation. In the dispute over the customs regulations for the north of the Emerald Isle, the EU Commission has already initiated 4 new infringement proceedings against Great Britain this year. Despite numerous appeals from the 27 EU countries to London to implement the Northern Ireland Protocol, the British government has refused. That's what the Commission said at the time in a statement. The British government called the Commission's actions disappointing. For more than a year, attempts had been made, or now almost 2 years, to find common solutions in the spirit of constructive cooperation. However, the UK is not ready to engage in serious talks on the issue. Instead, unilateral changes to the protocol will continue to be debated in the British Parliament. The proceedings brought by the EU could end up before the European Court of Justice against London. The Northern Ireland Protocol is part of the Brexit agreement between Brussels and London and is intended to regulate customs checks in the exchange of goods between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. London had originally agreed to the regulation to prevent checks at the inner Irish border, as this could endanger the peace process in the former troubled region. Now, however, the British government wants to abolish most checks between Northern Ireland and Great Britain unilaterally and exempt British traders for goods to Northern Ireland from the obligation to make EU customs declarations. London argues that the Northern Ireland Protocol undermines peace in the region by blocking government there, which is complete BS. The pro-British DUP has been opposing the formation of a government, and they always say it's the protocol. No, this time it's because they came second and Sinn Féin was the strongest for the first time. The EU rejects a fundamental revision of the agreement, and it's not necessary, but it has allowed practical simplifications in the checks. But a total of 7 infringement procedures relating to the Northern Ireland Protocol are pending against Great Britain. The 4 newest procedures concern non-compliance with customs obligations and checks on goods entering the UK from Northern Ireland, which Brussels says increases the risk of smuggling across the Northern Ireland border, and non-compliance with EU legislation, notably on alcohol tax and VAT on the e-commerce. So there's a lot going on. And I don't know how anybody wants to trust a British government if they continue signing agreements they are not holding up, and that they want all the time to unilaterally change. That is not how international law works. But this government, and well, it's not this government, because how many governments did we have this year alone there? Those governments, they will do everything to keep their own people in line and to hold their majority in parliament until they are really forced to hold an election at the latest moment. Because they know if there was an election now, they would go down. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.